Mr. Chairman and members of the council, the next item on the agenda is H1, and this is from Rob Hancock of 11 Juniper Court. And this is
Madam Clerk.
Yes.
May I forgot a really important part where I always thank all of our boards and commissions and volunteers. And I just want to do that really quickly. This council appreciates, and this town appreciates what you do. It would be impossible to get things done that we get done without the efforts and energies from the volunteers. We typically have a great interest in openings, as you saw this evening, and reappointments, people that get on, want to stay on, to continue to give back to the community. And this council says thank you. Go ahead, Madam Clerk, I apologize for interrupting.
That's okay. The next item on the agenda is H1, and this is Rob Hancock of 11 Juniper Court, and this is in regards to the creation of a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and included is a proposed mission statement, charge, and composition. And this is continued from September 30th, 2020. We do have some letters here on correspondence. There's a letter of objection from Diane McGee, and there's also a couple of letters of support, and those letters of support are from Tony Mortini, 46 Highlands Road, Jacob Breyer from the Barrington Town Council, Adele Perry, 26 Andrews Court, Mel Burnham from 211 State Street, Representative June Speakman from District 68, and Representative Susan Donovan from District 69. We also have one from Kathy Harrington, Nancy Kellner, Bradley Wester, and Charles Kellner.
Thank you. Is the petitioner on? Is Mr. Hancock on? There he is. Excellent. So, Rob, if you could state your name and address for the record, I'd like to give you an opportunity to kind of restate. It's been a while since we've had this discussion, and just wanted to have you remind everyone what's being proposed and also the adjustments that were made.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the council for the opportunity to address you again this evening. My name is Rob Hancock of 11 Juniper Court, and I'm speaking on behalf of the working group of about 17 residents who helped to create the proposed mission statement, charge, and composition for a potential committee on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I thank you for your comments about all the great work that boards and commissions do in this town. And I think it is really important about how we work together as volunteers and in partnership with the council and the opportunities that presents. I last spoke with all of you last fall when this petition first came before the council. And at that meeting, this council voted unanimously to support the spirit of the proposal and directed us to work with the solicitor on developing the details of what such a committee would look like as you make the final determination on whether to create it. I myself very much appreciated that vote because I believe it affirmed that our town values diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that we believe as a community and as a town, we should work to ensure that everyone feels welcome and included here. It also recognized that there's a lot to consider when the council is deciding whether or not to create any type of town committee or initiative. And there's a lot to consider about what the structure of our commissions and towns and boards should do. And I'll say for myself, and I would say for the other folks that worked as part of this working group, we're humbled by the opportunity to work with the solicitor on this important responsibility. And I hope that the recommendation that we have provided demonstrates the seriousness and thoughtfulness with which we approach this work, even as you consider your vote on whether we should move forward with creating this committee. Just for a little bit of the background, following the council meeting last fall, we met with Mr. Urcilla, the town solicitor, who was very generous with his time and knowledge. He helped in that conversation, helped us identify the specific deliverables that the council would need in order to create such a committee. That included a targeted mission statement, a detailed charge, and also outline a process for the council to determine the composition of the committee. Following the meeting, our working group got to work. We researched how other towns in New England and beyond have created similar committees. I think we looked at least 10 different mission statements and documents. We looked at the initiatives they created and how their councils or select boards determined their composition. We held Zoom meetings with several of those communities, and I want to thank council members who took the time to attend those meetings so they can hear directly from those communities as they consider the right step forward here. In addition, we met several times as a working group, as well as in subgroups to draft the proposal that you have before you. Right before the holidays, I sent this to the solicitor who reviewed it. He had no edits or recommendations and directed me to reach out to the clerk to have it placed back on the agenda. So that brings us to tonight. What I'd like to do is just take a few minutes to briefly walk through the recommendation and share some of the considerations we made while creating it. And I do that in part because this is a recommendation. It's written on paper. It's not chiseled in stone. I fully expect that the council might have some questions or edits or changes. And that sharing the intent and the goal is part of the work. The other thing I want to note is that as I go through, I'll try to provide some examples of things this committee could do or things that it might take on. With those words, could or might, I'm not trying to be coy or circumspect about what the committee would do, nor is there some hidden agenda that the committee seeks to carry out. To put it simply, this is not my committee, nor does it belong to the working group that helped put together this proposal. If created, this is a town committee, is our committee, as in the people of Bristol, and it will be created by and serve at the pleasure of the elected representatives in town. The committee's membership, like all the boards and commissions, are ultimately determined by the council. And so therefore, it's those folks that would ultimately determine the work of this committee in collaboration with our town officials. The document begins with a mission statement, and in particular, it focuses on promoting, fostering, and celebrating diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those three elements, I think, are really important because they emphasize and clarify the committee's work should be forward-facing, forward-looking. In particular, this committee is in no way intended, nor was it ever intended, to be a place to attempt to address or remedy any individual instances of discrimination, bias, or hate in town. And that's because avenues already exist for those who may be seeking redress, including through public safety, the courts, or the Rhode Island Commission of Prejudice or Bias. This committee is about fostering the type of environment through learning, understanding, celebrating, where those incidences are less likely to happen in the future. I think about the idea of creating a more perfect union, the same idea here with our work in Bristol. In addition, the committee provides an opportunity for us to stand apart as a town that promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion, which sends a powerful message to those who may have faced discrimination or marginalization anywhere, that this is a place for them. And so it's with that in mind that we've outlined some of the details in the charge, which has two main approaches: promoting and celebrating a diverse and welcoming inclusive community, and when requested by an elected official, providing advice on inclusive and equitable policies and initiatives. Some ways in which the committee could promote and support and nurture and celebrate a diverse and welcoming and inclusive community could be collaborating and expanding opportunities for events, for festivals, opportunities. So for example, other committees similar to this in areas have organized expansive, say, Black History Month events, which are Black History Month obviously coming up next month. And as other committees do in our town, doing that in coordination with our various institutions here in town as well. It would also support and promote existing new opportunities to address and understand our role in the fate of Indigenous people and the trade in enslaved people in America. History is important, it's critical, and no places really understand that quite like our town. And part of that is also understanding how we can learn from our history and the successes and the challenges that we have faced to be able to create a better future. The committee can help create opportunities for difficult conversations. One's focused on impact, not focused on intent, not trying to be judgmental, but to be supportive and learning and growing together. And then finally, opportunities to foster a welcoming and aware community by creating networks, conducting outreach, and establishing platforms. This can include some towns have worked on efforts to try to get underrepresented individuals on, help them have opportunities to be able to find boards and commissions that could work. Other places might look to create sort of welcome packets, opportunities, options with a clear statement of equity as well. So again, these are just some of the examples of what this committee could do based on what things have been sort of established and taken on in other places. The second main element of the charge is that upon the request of an elected official, or a town elected official, the committee could provide advice or conduct research on inclusive or equitable policies or initiatives. And one of the things that's really important to recognize there is, any committee is going to want to work in collaboration and in partnership with elected officials or with the council or town departments. It's not to anyone's benefit to create or establish policies or training opportunities that no one's looking for. But at the same time, these are tough choices, these are tough decisions. Having residents who are willing to support and volunteer and do some of the deep research and understanding that might be helpful in identifying some of these opportunities and to build the consensus for them will really be able to help support and serve the town. But again, that work is done as requested by an elected official, not independently and not on its own path forward. That could include creating needs assessments to understand what the town could do to support diversity and inclusion. It could include identifying education and training opportunities. And it could include reviewing existing policies or new procedures. So again, working collaboratively with the town. In terms of the composition, the suggestion that we have made here would be a committee that consists of an odd number of members between 9 and 15, and that those members would elect a chair and a vice chair. That the committee members would possess some relevant knowledge, training, or life experience, just as with any commission in town, obviously. And I know you just mentioned that you would be conducting interviews for committees and commissions. Is an opportunity to understand what folks might bring to their participation. And we've proposed an initial term of a year. Obviously, again, it can be what the council decides. Ideally, considering incorporation with different organizations or groups in town. Some towns have actually identified specific spots for either whether it's town staff or elected officials or other organizations in town. That could be something for consideration, obviously for the council to determine. The residents interested would submit an application outlining their interest and qualifications for consideration by the council. And so this is the document that we've put together based on the research, based on our conversations with the solicitor, and based on what we've heard from other towns. I'll close with this. I think quite a bit about the fact that here in Bristol, one of the things we're best known for is our celebration of the 4th of July, right? And celebration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That document that was created and aspired to say that all, it says men at the time, but I'll broaden it to say all people are created equal. And we know that was created as Thomas Jefferson himself, the writer of that, had enslaved people, and even had some alongside him as he was writing that document. We have been a country, a town that's always on the path forward. And when there's work to be done, we roll up our sleeves to do it. And I think this committee could provide us that opportunity to continue to work towards that more perfect nation. And not one where we are trying to ignore our differences, but as Dr. King says, not be judged by the color of our skin. Celebrate our differences, celebrate our understandings, and come together as a community. So I thank you very much for considering this. I thank you very much for the opportunity to put this forth, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. about the proposal that you have before you.
So I'm going to, unless there's objection to the council, I'd like to open up for council if there's questions at the moment. That certainly I'll open it up for that. If there isn't, then we'll take the next step. I know there is members of the public that asked to speak and did not ask, but are still certainly going to raise their hand and would like to speak. Certainly we're going to have that happen this evening. So first and foremost, this council, is there any questions before I open it up to the public for questions or comment? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a quick question about process?
Of course.
Before we ask him questions, do you think we'll be putting a motion on the table, or is that going to be, are we planning on doing that later after the public comment?
I am open to either way. I was not going to call for a motion at this point. If there is one, certainly we'll entertain it. If not, then we can, I thought we would hear questions, get those answers, and then open it up to the public. And then after all of that happens, then close the public dialogue and have discussion with inside the council.
Okay. I'll just start off with maybe some of my comments on the proposal here. I had a chance to listen in on some of the meetings that this group was having. It was a very large group of people. Recall that we, as a council, unanimously asked this group of people to work with the town solicitor to come up with a charge and a mission statement. And I think Mr. Hancock was a little humble about the amount of effort that went into this, because there had been multiple meetings, dozens of meetings, many hours that this group put in to work with the town solicitor and to do the type of investigation that they needed to see what was working in other towns. And so I want to start off by thanking the group, this diverse group of people who are working on this, for the amount of time that they put into it. And then in addition to that, I'd like to thank the town solicitor for the guidance that he was able to give them as they were going through the process of writing something like this up. So with that being said, I kind of feel like it would be good to have a motion out there as we're asking questions.
I'll take that as a motion. Go ahead, please.
Well, and I want to preface this by saying that this motion is totally open to amendments. But I'll go ahead and make a motion to adopt the mission and the charge that is before us, and then to refer the matter to the town clerk to receive applications so that we can select 9 to 15 candidates for this committee. And again, I just wanted to put that one out there in the broadest, the broadest package possible, so that if there are any adjustments that need to be made, I would be open to making any kind of amendments to that.
Excellent.
Motion for discussion.
All right, motion made by Aaron. I won't restate it because he clearly stated it, and seconded by Tim for discussion. So, colleagues, before I open up to the public, is there any other questions, comments? Mary? We can't hear you. Mary, we can't hear you.
Wait a second. Sorry. Okay.
There you are.
Sorry. I just had a question for Rob, and I do want to echo that sentiment of that Councilman Lay just made. I mean, I think this is a much better document. That was what was given to us originally, and I know people worked very hard and are very committed to it. The question that I have, and I kind of know the answer because I've asked members of your group this in the past. What is you did consider just having this as a committee, a community organization in the town without the sort of imprimatur of the council. And I'm wondering why if you could just let everyone know in your words, why you wanted to go this route And the reason I ask that is multifold is one of them is, and I'll go through this later on when I explain my vote, is there are many groups in town that this work can be folded into, number one, and they're not town-sponsored committees or commissions. And so that is one of them. And I just would like you to kind of address that issue, because the town, I went to your meeting with the town of Sharon, Mass, and I thought it was interesting because I asked them the same question and they gave the answer. And, you know, as I said, I know I'm pretty sure what your response will be, but they started out they've only been in as a town committee of Sharon, Massachusetts for about 6 months or so. I went back and I looked at their minutes today. I think there's just about 4 or 5 of them so far. But I think for a year and a half to 2.5 years, they were a community group. I can't remember if they were sponsored by a church or if they were just a group of citizens that got together. And so they really were able to begin their work that way and to kind of like show their abilities, their effort, so forth, without jumping right in as a committee of the town. So I'd like, if you could address that a little bit, I would appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman, for that question. I really appreciate it. And I thank you too, because I had mentioned to touch on that, but you get a little nervous when you're kind of walking through these things. So one of the main reasons why I think there's real value to having this as a town committee is that these are hard conversations. And one of the most important things is that they are ones that bring in a broad range of voices and they bring in a broad range of inputs. The conversation this committee would have as it considers this work is going to be, really challenging, and I think can be a great opportunity to learn and grow. And the public forum, right, through a committee that you are elected officials create really helps ensure that diverse idea of thought is part of the conversation, and that's what's so important. And by extension, then, because it is that representative it's a component of our representatives here, it also adds to some legitimacy of the work. It's harder work for sure, no doubt about it. Private organizations can sometimes move faster and be more nimble, but the harder work is oftentimes the more important work. So that is, I think, to me, the main reason why a town committee could be so beneficial, because it does give us that space to come together and have conversations across all sorts of different types of difference, not just identity, but also idea and thought. So that's the main reason. But also, too, I think it's important that Bristol could be a leader. As we looked at towns, there are towns in Massachusetts that have done this. I believe we would be the first town in the state of Rhode Island. There's a few cities that have similar groups like this, but that's an opportunity for us to be a leader and taking on that hard work. So those are the two reasons that I think having it as a town committee could be beneficial. But I thank you for your engagement and your thought on the issue as well.
Could I just say one quick thing further?
Sure. Go ahead.
I think a lot of this issue comes down to that very point, Rob and everyone. I mean, I think everyone wants to celebrate diversity. Everybody wants to have a welcoming community. I think that really comes down to begin this process, what is the best approach to take for it, to make a difference, to not create further divide. And I think that is really the heart of the issue. The issue is not about whether or not we value diversity and equity and inclusion. It's whether or not it needs to be a town sponsored committee or whether it can go along as a community group and linked to much of the other work that goes on in the community already. So that's the struggle that I have had in thinking about this in great detail for a while. So that's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Jeremy,
Tim.
just had a question. Hi, Rob, and Thank you, DEI group, for all your hard work on this. When you think of trust and you think of an environment, you want to make sure it's safe for everybody to come out, because I think remarkable things happen when you create a safe environment. People want to work together, and it's all inclusive, and it's going to help us as a town get stronger. But Rob, I had a question in regards to the structure of the group. I think you're leaning not towards an ad hoc group, but you would be leaning towards more of a structured group, sort of like the Christmas festival, where they have a chairman, vice chairman, that sort of thing, but it's not necessarily everybody's interviewed, but it's like a group kind of charged with the mission that you've outlined here. Do I have that correctly?
Thank you, Councilman Sweeney, for your question. So I would imagine the committee is ad hoc in the sense that it is it's at the pleasure of the council, right? So it's not something within the town charter that is there. It's really about doing good work, and then if for some reason it's not happening, or setting out a timeline for a committee to operate, and then a timeline to determine whether it should continue forward. In terms of the composition, I would certainly defer to the council, right? And what the council feel would be appropriate, whether it is an interview type setting, whether it is a recommendation type setting. I know there's different ways in which councils and commissions are filled within the town. But I think that's a question that is sort of best determined by the council in terms of its structure and approach. One of the things too, again, to emphasize, and is really important with it, this is not a committee that would have any enforcement power, right? It would not have any, administrative review requirement. There's no components like that within the setting. So it's not something where the individuals of this committee would operate ever independently in ways that some of our boards do in town. So that's a little bit of the thinking, but again, defer to recommendations of solicitor or the council in terms of how to put it together for the final recommendation.
Sure. Because I was, when I look at the charge, it's more around events, which I think is fantastic. It's more about educational outreach, better communication, and anything that maybe council members want the group to look into. That's something else to do. But that's why I just wanted to know if there was a preference on structure. That's all. But thank you.
1 second, Mayor. I'm going to give Tony an opportunity, just because everyone else did.
All that stuff for now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mary.
It's all the time, sorry. I just wanted to clarify that, because I have never viewed this in anything that I've, in my reading of the document or any of the conversations that we've had. I've never taken this as similar to the 4th of July or the Christmas Festival Committee, which are very specific. They have a very specific charge, and that is to make an event happen, and they consequently do other events as part of it and as fundraising. I kind of view those as sort of, this is my term, and Mike can weigh in on this, but quasi-publics in a way. They could function just as well as being a nonprofit. They make the determination who's on the committee, and we sort of give consent to it because they're looking for people who are willing to do work, and it's towards a particular time frame. So I don't see this being similar to that, and that is one, actually, to be honest with you, that's one of the issues with this whole concept, is because there's so many facets to this that everybody has a different perspective on what it is and could be and should be. Even the people who are proponents who have sent letters, it is very, very different in some people's eyes. In some people's eyes, it deals with disability as a resource for people with disabilities and mental health issues, and other people see it as something that deals strictly with race and ethnicity. It is very hard to pinpoint exactly, so I don't think it's similar to the 4th of July or the Christmas Festival. I think that the work that you do could be easily incorporated into some of those committees by adding like a multicultural component or what have you. And that's something that's all my thing that's going to talk about. But I don't see it as the same type of committee. And I don't know, Mike, if you have any comment about that.
Yeah.
So Mary, I think that gets to the issue of what the council as a policy decision would want to see happen. There are a lot of ways to go at this. It could be if you go forward with it, it could be an ad hoc committee. There'd be time parameters. You could start that way and then decide later whether or not it should be a more full-time type committee. You're dealing with a plain sheet of paper right now, so I would say anything's possible.
Well, are we dealing with a plain piece of paper if we have a very specific and we're going to accept a particular mission and outline for a committee and to know what that exactly is?
No, I was thinking in terms of whether it's how long it would be in place, etc. No, you certainly have a very specific proposal in front of you. I was really responding to your question about should it be, quasi this or should it be long term? That's really up to all of you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the council?